Hi boys and girls, it's Miss Rossi. Today we're going to finish our Henri Matisse inspired Goldfish Bowl still lifes. What you'll be needing today is your drawing from last week, and you're also going to need something to color with. I'm going to use a mixture of crayons and watercolor paints today, and I'm going to do a crayon watercolor resist, but if you only have crayons at home or you want to use markers, colored pencils, or anything else, you can do that as well. I'm going to color in most of my small details with my crayons and then fill in the larger spaces with my watercolors today. The space I especially want to use my watercolors on is the water inside my goldfish bowl to give it a little bit of a different texture than the rest of my picture. So I'm going to start by coloring in my smaller details with my crayons. So I'm going to do my goldfish, the details inside my goldfish bowl. I'm going to do the small details that are in my background, so all of those flowers that I used on the wall. I'm going to do some of the details in my window, and I'm also just going to do a few of the smaller stripes on my tablecloth. Now you can decide what's going to work best for your picture. If you would also like to do a crayon and watercolor resist, you can pick out the smaller details here and there and do those in crayon, and then go back over the top with everything in watercolor to fill in those larger spaces. And just remember, wherever you put your crayon, you want to use your crayon nice and dark. You don't want to leave any white space, and that will prevent our watercolor from going into that space. That crayon and that wax is going to resist the watercolor from covering over it, since they don't mix together. So I'm going to go in first with my crayons for all of those little details, and then I'll come back to do the watercolor. Okay, so I went and filled in all of my small details with my crayons. So I colored in my fish and everything inside of my fishbowl. I also decided to color in my fishbowl silver so it will look more like glass. And I even went around the edge with my crayon just to keep a border in there to help hold in my watercolor paints. I colored in some of my smaller stripe details on my table, and then I colored in all the small details on my wallpaper in the background, and then just a few little small things that were left in the window. Now I'm going to grab my watercolor paints, and I'm going to fill in all of the rest of the white space using my watercolor. So the first thing I'm going to focus on is the water inside of my fishbowl. I'm going to swirl my paintbrush around in my water, wipe it off on the edge so I don't drip water all over the table, and slowly swirl it in my blue watercolor paint. I am going to fill in my fishbowl very carefully with my blue watercolor paint. And if it is a little too dark for you, you can always get a little bit more water on your paintbrush, and that is going to help spread it out, and that will lighten that color just a little bit. And since we used our crayons already to add the colors for those small details, you can paint very gently right over the top of all of those little details, and they won't get covered up because our crayon, like we said before, is going to resist our watercolor paint. It is not going to let the watercolor paint cover over it. So I can paint right on top of those bubbles that I colored in white and still be able to see them through my blue watercolor paint. I want to get a little bit more paint on my brush, so I'm going to wet my brush again and dip back into that blue color and fill in the rest of that space. You can even go right on top of your goldfish. This is why we wanted to make sure when we colored in with our crayon, we wanted to do it nice and dark and make sure we didn't leave any white space, because the watercolor is only going to fill in whatever white space is left. If you want to mix any other colors in with your water, maybe I want to do a little bit of green in here and let that swirl around. And I think maybe I'll add even a little bit of purple. I'm making sure to wash my brush in the water before I go and mix into my other colors. Adding the other cool colors like green and purple will make your water a little bit more interesting than just being plain blue. And it's nice because with our watercolors, we can mix those colors together and give it even more of a water-like effect inside our fishbowl. The next thing I'm going to do is my small little frame over here. So I'm washing my paintbrush and I'm going to have a blue sky. So I am just going to carefully fill in the whole sky in here, blue. Again, I can go right over those clouds that I already colored in with my crayon, and I can go right over the trees and stuff. And then I'm going to do some bright green grass. So I washed my paintbrush, swirling around in my green paint, and then I can fill that space in nicely. Washing my paintbrush again, I'm now going to do the background on the wall behind my fishbowl. I think I'm going to do this yellow just to fill in all of that white space, and then the base down here I think I'm going to do red. Again, I can paint right over the top very carefully wherever I added that crayon because it is still going to shine through. I do want to be careful though going around any areas where I already added watercolor. Like I want to be careful going around my bowl because I don't want to mix my yellow paint that I'm using now into my fishbowl. Now I'm going to clean off my paintbrush and go down to the base. And down here I am going to use some of my reddish orange colors. And I am just going to carefully fill this space in. Now again, I can go right over that blue crayon that I already used and it won't cover it up. But on this edge where there's no crayon, where my yellow from my wall is meeting the red of my table, they might start to mix together, and that's okay. You just want to be careful that you don't go too far and you don't add too much water in there if you're afraid of them mixing together. And I'm also going to be careful around my bowl. That's what my table looks like all finished. After I went in with that first red color, I went over the top of it with more of a dark pink in certain spots to make even more of a crisscross design down there. Now I am finished with my project, so I am going to let it dry. Once you're finished with your still life, you can take a photo or video of it and upload it on my Canvas page. I can't wait to see the beautiful and colorful goldfish bowl still lifes you guys have created. Try your best, have fun, and get creative. I'll see you soon. Bye!